you mentioned this idea of purifying the nation, getting rid of the riffraff, getting rid of the other, the brown, the Jew, the Muslim, the people who somehow sully the DNA of the nation. That's a standard Nazi-fascist trope. The idea is that our pure men and women would have done wonders in this country if they were not held behind by all these impurities that have infiltrated the body of the nation. And that if somehow we manage to purify the body of the nation, which will, unfortunately, they say, but they don't mean it, involve strengthening our defenses in order to keep our borders airtight, and that may involve the occasional war with the riffraff out there, the foreigners who are trying to undermine our sovereignty and so on. So this whole narrative may begin beautifully in terms of GDP, especially GDP per capita. If you have military Keynesianism, if you spend a lot of money on the police, on army, on armies and weaponry and so on. This is exactly what happened in the 1920s in Italy and 1930s in Germany. This is what the European Union is trying to do now with military Keynesianism, of embarking upon a spending spree on weaponry, which is also underpinned by Islamophobia, by the fear of the Chinese, of the Russian, of the African. Remember what the president of the European Council said, that Europe is like a beautiful garden, but it's surrounded by a jungle, and the jungle is trying to invade it, and we, the gardeners, must prune it, and we must stop it. This is the same narrative as that of the fascists and the Nazis of the 1920s and 30s, and we know where it ends up. Military Keynesianism does not work, unless you have one war after the other to keep the machine fed. At some point, either you're going to stop the wars and then the whole economic miracle is going to collapse, or you're going to be embroiled in a world war, in a genocide, in some regional conflict that in the end turns your own country into a wasteland. So in the name of purifying the nation is led down the garden path.
I can't imagine a more stupid position than being a German fascist. If you were a German nationalist, if you were a German ultra-nationalist, why would you want to pursue that politics? Because you look at Germany's fundamentals at the start of the 20th century, its scientific base is just wild. You know, your background is science, your parents were scientists. I mean, Christ, it's just they had a virtual monopoly on the world's leading theoretical scientists. You look at the innovations coming out of that country, its population growth, its cultural production. The 20th century could have been the German century. It should have been the German century, but they fucked up twice really badly. And the second one was particularly fucked up because, you know, look at Berlin in 1945 at the end of it, and your country gets partitioned. And I find it remarkable that even given that, you lost the 20th century, you lost the possibility of being, you know, this extraordinary great cultural political power, and you still go, oh, you know, old Adolf, the Austrian painter.
The Austrian painter. Second-rate painter, third-rate painter. Aaron, I think there is a missing link in your narrative. I agree with everything you said. The missing link is capitalism. Because you see, if you combine a lot of capital goods, machinery, science, engineering, physics, you put it all together, you end up with a great deal of potential, which you described beautifully. A potential to do great things, to be a great country on the cusp of scientific revolutions, of production, and so on and so forth. But when those machines are owned by a tiny percentage of the population, and their accumulated profits hinge on the exploitation of the many, then that introduces the poison, which, let me put it very succinctly if I can, you end up being able to produce a lot more stuff than the majority of the people who are producing it in the factories can consume, because you have squeezed the living daylights out of them in order to have high profit rates and price cost margins for the very few. And then you have a dearth in demand. That's when Keynes comes in. So you have a slump, then you have unemployment. That gives rise to discontent. Then some third-rate painter from Austria gets up on a soapbox and says, I know who the problem is. It's the Jew, or the Islamist, or, the foreigner, or the Irish. It doesn't matter, right? Somebody, the left-handed, the trans, the gay, whoever that can be identifiable and who can become the focal point of the discontent, which is as the result of the failure of capitalist labor and capital markets. Okay, and then you get a lot of strength from them, and you say, I'm going to make you great again. I'm going to make you proud again. Just give me absolute authority, and I will look after you, and I'm going to go and get the Jew, the Islamist, the Frenchman, the Greek, whatever, yeah? The British. And then you get a lot of power, and at the beginning, you can take this power, like Hitler did, and you can throw a lot of money at industry to build up weaponry. And that creates employment. And then people love you because they were unemployed and now they are not unemployed anymore. And they feel really very proud because they see a lot of tanks rolling out of the production line. And they have parades. And you build an Olympic stadium and you stage the Olympics. And you have Riefenstahl creating beautiful film of the re-emergent, national, proud, species. And then at some point you invade Poland. But that, this is what happened in the 1930s in Germany. They are now attempting to do it again. When Trump says, make America great again. I mean, when was America great? Ever. It never was great.
I suppose, a skeptic of that would say...
When they had slaves?
No, they would just say...
When they had a civil war?
Before it deindustrialized. That's what they would say. Before we deindustrialized, that's what they would say.
But that's when they had slaves.
No,
in the cotton fields.
Before...
Yeah, and they killed all the natives.
But I'm just trying to...
when was that? When was the greatness of the United States realized?
I think that Trump's arguments that register the most, forget the cultural war stuff, forget Sydney Sweeney and adverts, like literally nobody cares about that stuff. The stuff that I think is agreed on by J.D. Vance all the way down to, a Trump voter in the Appalachian Mountains who, barely consumes news content. They agree on two things. Illegal migration and deindustrialization. They agree on that. So, okay, park the illegal migration thing. I think when they say make the country great again, I do genuinely think they mean before deindustrialization, which we agree that's a natural feature of capitalist production.
Well, it's actually
profiteering.
Deindustrialization was a catastrophe for the American working class. There's no doubt about it. It could have to do with immigration. Nothing with immigration. I mean,
sure.
The United States is the result of migration. It doesn't matter whether it's illegal or legal. I mean, in my country, we had migration of half of Albania. It was all illegal in the 1990s, and it created a much better Greece as a result. I mean, my university students, most of them now are children of those Albanian migrants. Without them, we wouldn't have a university. They are the best students I've ever had. So, it doesn't, this illegal thing. Migration is part and parcel of the American story. Where you're absolutely right, and where Trump is absolutely right, is that deindustrialization was a disaster for the majority of Americans. You go from coast to coast, and all you see is carnage. The word that he used in his inauguration speech in 2016, which was a horrible speech, but the word carnage did capture the result of deindustrialization. But why did deindustrialization happen? It didn't happen because of the Mexicans or because of the Nicaraguans or the Greeks migrating into America. It happened because Wall Street effectively took over after 1971, the end of Bretton Woods, and it started recycling the rest of the world's capitalist profits. So, once America stopped being a producer of surplus goods, and being an industrial superpower as it was in the 1950s and 60s, for a number of reasons. The Vietnam War, the internal dynamics of the American capitalist economy led America to start having a trade deficit. And it was the decision of Richard Nixon and the people who followed Richard Nixon, people like Paul Volcker, who was the president of the Federal Reserve and so on, and the people in the Republican Party that now their descendants are applauding Trump, who decided, okay, we have a deficit. We're not going to be German. We're not going to tighten our belts. We're not going to introduce austerity. We're not going to do a George Osborne. What we're going to do is we're going to step on the accelerator and increase our deficits and make the rest of the world pay for them. So the rest, the German Japanese manufacturers were producing cars and electronics and so on, sending them to the United States. The United States would pay with dollars. Then the German and Japanese capitalists, and then the Chinese capitalists as well, would send those dollars back to Wall Street. And what would Wall Street do with that? It would buy American debt, so the American government could be in perpetual increasing deficits and wouldn't matter. They would buy shares in American companies that subcontracted their manufacturing to Vietnam. And real estate. Thus, Donald Trump was born as a result of this model, which deindustrialized. So this is the great hypocrisy of people like Donald Trump. He's looking the working class of the United States in the eye and says, "Oh, I feel your pain." But their pain is exactly this. It's the output of exactly the same process that led to Donald Trump's real estate business success, right? And in the end, of course, he's going to sell them down the line in the same way that Hitler led to the destruction of Germany. Because even if, let's say that Donald Trump's policy and J.D. Vance's policy of slapping tariffs on all the countries that export stuff to the United States works, and there is reindustrialization of America. I don't think there will be, but let's say there is. Then what happens immediately after that is that the flow of capital back to the United States stops, because the flow of capital into Wall Street from the rest of the world is the flip side of the same coin as the American trade deficit. Once you eliminate the trade deficit, there will be no more German profits, excess profits, or Japanese profits, or Chinese profits from the American market to go back to Wall Street. So who's going to suffer? Financiers in Wall Street and the realtors in New York. So Trump, even if he succeeds, he will have to choose between betraying his own class, the realtors and the financiers, or the working class of the United States. Make no mistake that he will betray the working class of the United States. Exactly the same way that every other ultra-rightist has betrayed the working class that it has appealed to for support in order to be authoritarian.